If anyone's not comfortable, you can pop off your camera. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. So I think that I think it's Lisa or Michelle is going to share my presentation, if that's all right. I'm delighted to be here. Thanks so much for having me. I never stop getting nervous when I'm about to give a presentation. So I'm feeling it in my nervous system, a bit jittery. But I have to say that I saw a few lovely faces that I know that are very familiar when they logged on. So that was lovely and very reassuring. So I'm Nicola O'Sullivan. My background is in youth and community work. I've spent many years home visiting and set up 2 family support projects way back in the early 2000s. And I now spend a bit of time home visiting in a slightly different way, more with foster families and very young children in their care. I do a lot of reflective practice, a lot of supervision, which I really like. But I have to say, a key part of my work in visiting families, what has really been a lot of it has been very enjoyable, but I have to say that having good supervision and having some very good reflective practice techniques has really sustained me in the work and has helped me to keep focused. So this morning, I'm going to share some basic ideas about supervision and reflective practice. We'll think together about using some reflective practice techniques and the potential benefit of these. And you'll see that this is part 1, so there's a lot to think about in this area. So I've really just pulled together some initial ideas for you this morning, but there's lots more. And I'll share the slides, and there's also lots of resources that I'm happy to share. So I'd like to begin by saying that, from my perspective, home visiting in the early years can be emotionally demanding and very relationship focused, and often takes place in complex family environments. And reflective practice can help us to pause, process, and stay tuned to both ourselves and the families that we work with. And I think that's really central. We need to have a sense of how we're doing as we go into a family, what's happening for us on the inside, as well as what's happening for the family that we're meeting. And that can be really tricky. So we're going to have our first little piece of reflective practice this morning. What I'm going to ask you to do is just to take a few seconds and to just think about, look, what were you doing before you came into this space? Why did you even come into the space? What's the week been like? How are you? If you were to just do a quick 5-second check-in, how are you as you come into the space this morning? And I'm going to ask Michelle just to share the second slide with us. And what I'm going to get you to do is to have a look at my lovely dogs. And what I would like you to do is to choose one of these dogs that reflects how you're doing this morning as you log in. So I'd love you to put in the chat there's a number beside each dog. So what kind of creatures do we have coming into the space this morning? And this is thanks to my colleague Joe Williams, who's put together lots of these kind of feeling slides for us as we go. Okay, so we've got some heads in the sand. I'm looking at the chat too. Hey, nice. Okay, some tired dogs there. Lovely. Some dogs that are up for some fun. Great. Ready for a chilled evening. I love it. That's great. It's right. Brilliant. Lovely. So you have a good sense of where you're at. Lots of 5s. So the next task might be to get up and do a bit of a jig. Lots of 5s. Some 8s. Great. Thank you so much. So in a way, it's just a really quick way to check in, have a quick think about where am I at, and it gives me a good sense of where we're going this morning. All right. So if we could move to the next slide, if that's okay. So I just want to start by saying that regular and consistent supervision and reflective practice is a cornerstone of good practice in social care, home visiting, and family support work. It's not just an administrative requirement, it's a process that sustains the quality, safety, and emotional resilience of us as practitioners. So when you think about supervision and reflective practice in your work, I'd like you to think for a minute about what does it mean to you? What are the types of supervision that you receive, and what types of self-reflection do you engage in? And you don't all have to put something into the chat, but even if there were one or two comments there, just to give me a sense of what is it that you're receiving at the moment in terms of supervision, what kinds of reflective practice might you engage in? That would be really helpful for me. Okay. Lovely. Thanks, Grania. Weekly supervision for 2 hours, that's quite a lot. Yeah, weekly and one-to-one, lovely. And in terms of maybe some self-reflective techniques that you might use as a group or as individuals, 4 sessions per year, okay, 1 hour. Lovely. Thanks, Tina. Weekly supervision, monthly check-ins, okay. Private, fortnightly and ad hoc, yeah, lovely, okay. Yeah, supervision can be taken up with housekeeping bits. Yeah, I agree. It's really hard to keep it on track. Yeah. Okay. Lovely. Thank you, guys. Reflective practice. Thanks, Suzanne. 1-to-1 every 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, lovely. Okay, so there's a really good sense of what you're getting there. Yeah, Maura, I know it's a safe space. Yeah. So there are differences, and we'll talk a little bit about this in terms of supervision, a supervision space, and a reflective practice, let's say reflective practice techniques, or what we might do ourselves. We'll talk a little bit about that. So you'll know this based on all of what you're saying in the chat, but I'm going to share it anyway. So getting into a little bit more detail of why it matters. So maybe just moving to the next slide, if that's okay. So it matters because of safeguarding and accountability. It gives you a chance to think about us, yourselves, and for us to think about ourselves as accountable workers. It reduces the risk of drift, oversight, and poor practice. Quality of practice and professional development allows us to reflect on the complexity of the work, receive guidance and develop skills. It keeps us aligned to policy and ethical standards. Emotional support and resilience, like some of you said in the chat, you know, it can be a very safe space to process the impact of the work. Reflective practice can offer us deeper reflection rather than only reactive problem solving or housekeeping bits like some people put in the chat. And it helps us as well, which I think is really central, to think about our own values and experiences. What is it that brings us to the work? What are maybe the biases that we have, the blind spots that we have to the work? Having another mind to help us really think about that can be, in a gentle, safe, kind of respectful way, can be very helpful in the work. Could we move to the next slide, if that's okay? So this is a very well-known quote from Professor Eileen Munro, who reviewed the child protection and welfare system in the UK. She did 3 separate reviews back in the early and mid-2000s. And she said that experience on its own is not enough. It needs to be allied to reflection, time and attention given to mulling over the experience and learning from it. So in a way, when we think about, you know, ourselves, some of us as experienced practitioners, well, for me, experience is less about how many years you've been in the job and more about, are you processing what you're doing? Are you processing what you're learning? Are you thinking about how you're bringing yourself into that family environment, who you are, how you come across, how the family comes across, what are the kind of gaps that you may need support in really thinking about? So reflective practice then is a continuous process where we critically examine our experience, our actions and our decisions to learn and improve our practice. It involves self-awareness, understanding our personal cultural and racial biases, and considering how these factors influence our interactions with the people that we serve, if you like. And we also need to have an opportunity to reflect on the success and the challenges so that we can identify areas for growth and develop strategies, I think, to enhance the kind of service that we're providing, if you like. We could move to the next slide, please. So why self-awareness matters. So part of supervision and reflective practice means that we need to have a relationship with ourselves. We are the tools. You know this. You'll have heard this lots of times before. We are the tools. Yes, we can learn different skills, different trainings, different theories, But in essence, it's our relationship with ourselves and how we integrate what we know that really matters in terms of how we show up in work and how we show up for people. It's also not optional, it's really essential in the work. So to provide sustainable, effective and compassionate care, we need to be thinking about who we are, what brings us to the work. So sustainable home visiting work requires tending to your own well-being, improves resilience, effectiveness and emotional safety. That's really important. I think we talk a lot, well, certainly when I'm thinking about home visiting and the early family support work, we thought a lot about physical safety, lone working, all of that kind of stuff. That's really important, but so too is emotional safety. Models healthy practice for colleagues and students. We're helped to recognize our own personal triggers and emotional responses. It invites us to explore bias and assumption, and it enables trauma-informed, non-judgmental care. There are different types of self-awareness, reflective practice that we can engage in, like mindfulness, narrative writing, thinking about how did this affect me, what would I do differently, and journaling after visits. So what is reflective practice then? Well, at the heart of good practice in all people professions is the ability to continue learn, reflect on and develop our work. Throughout our careers, we found that the most engaged, fulfilled and effective practitioners are the ones who dedicated to constantly learning and developing their practice and the practice of those around them. So in terms of even being in a team, being able to gently challenge each other, being able to really think together about each other's blind spots is very important in the work. If you could move to the next slide, please. So some key aspects of reflective practice, learning from experience. So often in Western cultures, learning about things is privileged. So learning the latest theory, learning the latest skill. So often that can be really privileged. Like if I know more, I'll be a better practitioner. But actually we need to have a good balance of learning about something and also learning from experience. And that's what we're talking about today. How do we give time to learning from our own experiences of being in the work? Evaluating and analysing, developing professional skills, improving quality of care, building resilience and well-being. So all of these are kind of key aspects of reflective practice that feed into supervision as well. So I'm going to show you now 2 slides and they're going to be a little bit chunky in terms of wording, but I think it's important for us to be able to differentiate, between supervision and reflective practice. They will of course overlap and you'll know that. So if we could just move to the next slide. So some of the differences and similarities. So clinical supervision, we talk about it, is a structured formal process that provides a space for accountability, development and support in professional practice. And I think some of what you put in the chat sort of describes that, doesn't it? It's regular, it's for a set amount of time, I bring my work. Reflective practice is often considered a broader, less formal process of critically examining our own experiences, feelings and assumptions to enhance learning. The purpose of supervision is to ensure quality of service, develops practitioner competence, safeguards ethical practice and provides emotional containment. And then the purpose of reflective practice enhances self-awareness, meaning-making and resilience and helps practitioners process the emotional and relational aspects of the work. Frameworks in terms of clinical supervision, those of you who get supervision will know this. So it often draws on structured models. And in my view, there should always be a model. Your supervisor should always have a supervision model. They may not need to, speak about that very, on the surface level all the time while doing supervision with you, but the supervisor should be coming into the space with a model in mind. So there are different types of model. We've got Proctor's model, we've got Kadushin's model, and then we have Hawkins and Showett, or the most recent Hawkins and McMahon 7-eyed model of supervision. We also have the cyclical model, and Toni Morrison's 4x4 model, which is often the one that's known by a lot of people. So there are a number of different supervision models. The benefit of a model is that it keeps the supervisor focused on what the purpose of supervision is. And that's really important so that we're not going down the wrong track here, that we're keeping focused, and it also keeps the supervision moving along. The frameworks in terms of reflective practice, there are many different frameworks. So if individually there's, Schoen's reflection in action, reflection on action, Gibbs, you have Kolb's, Fuchs critical reflection. If you're talking about a group reflective practice setting, you've got case discussion model or work discussion model. So equally, there are models in terms of reflective practice. also. If you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Thank you. Then in terms of supervision, accountability, the supervisor often has responsibility for monitoring standards, safeguarding and practice outcomes. That's if it's within an organisation. And for reflective practice, the accountability isn't so formal. It's really more of a focus on practitioner growth and well-being. Structure in terms of clinical supervision, often now more than ever before, clinical supervision is moving towards being an absolutely a part of your practice that you need to be in supervision. Reflective practice is more flexible and it can include journals, self-reflection, peer-based or group sessions, and it's often not formally recorded. The power dynamics that are in play in terms of clinical supervision, sometimes supervisor can be in a senior position, may hold a dual role. So that's something we can, it's not going to come up today, but it is a really big part of thinking about clinical supervision when somebody's in a dual role, when they're a supervisor and a manager. That presents dilemmas and challenges that can be gotten over, but needs to be thought about very carefully. In terms of reflective practice, it's a much more flatter peer groups or facilitated spaces. And in a way, the aim there is to reduce the sense of hierarchy and to foster kind of openness. Focus of exploration. So in clinical supervision, oftentimes it tends to balance on case content, skill development, ethical issues, professional identity, and practitioner well-being. And some of you put it in the chat, and this isn't unique, I think, to home visiting. We also see this in social work, social care settings, where sometimes supervision can go towards a more, let's say, meet the organizational needs, if you like. So housekeeping, structures, case management, rather than focus on, practitioner well-being, professional identity, professional development, skill development, that kind of thing. A model keeps that very balanced. Reflective practice then primarily explores emotional impact, values, assumptions, relational awareness. In terms of outcomes for clinical supervision, competence, accountability, professional development, improved service quality. And in terms of reflective practice, and you'll see the kind of slight difference, insight, resilience, critical thinking, improved relational capacity, and self-care. There is a strong research base for both, and I've put in some references there, and I'm very happy to share if for any of you who are interested in reading a little bit more about that. So I'm just going to show you one more slide, and then I'd love to hear what you've made of what I've said so far. So just move on to the next slide. Thank you. So here's why models are very important, because for some of us, when we move into a supervision or reflective practice space, we can be worried about what am I going to be asked here today? What, am I going to overshare something personal? Am I going to, will my supervisor, reflective practice facilitator think I'm not very good if I'm particularly vulnerable? So a model really helps for somebody who's in the facilitator role or supervisor role. Because when we are at our work, especially in human services, we bring all that we are to the work. It's a myth to think that we leave ourselves at the door. That's old kind of school thought, if you like. What we know now is that, and research has shown this, is that especially in spaces where we're working with trauma or complexity, where we're meeting people similar to our own loved ones, children, nephews, nieces, parents, grandparents sometimes, that this can get under our skin at times, not all the time, but sometimes. And so when we go into a reflective space or supervision space, we are interested in the intersection. So you see the three circles. The personal self is very much a kind of a therapy space. And of course, when, those of us who've been in therapy, you do bring in your work, at times, but the focus really is on its relationship to you as a person. When you're looking at professional therapeutic reflective practice or clinical supervision or reflective practice, we're really looking at the intersection where the personal professional role comes and where the work experience. So we're interested in your experience at work and how those intersect together. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. So any thoughts on what I've said so far? Any comments, any responses? Okay, I'll take that as keep going, Nicola, or give us another minute. Okay, I'll keep going. So if you could move to the next slide. Great, thanks, Claire. It's often good just when you know it's reaching. Okay, so why should we be reflecting and thinking about supervision? Other people will have other, I suppose, kind of passions. My passion is supporting practitioners to look after their emotional well-being. And really, I'm really interested in making sure that we're sustaining ourselves in the work, and that actually when you finish this work, that you're able to have a good quality of life, a good enough, as Winnicott says, a good enough quality of life outside of work and afterwards. Because you're giving up a lot. And I have to say that what you're doing in this work is you're doing a critical job on behalf of society. It's a very important job, and you're using yourselves in that job. So I'm very interested in how you look after that. So relationships are the heart of practice and of humanity. And so in that way, they're always going to be professional and personal. They're not just going to be one or the other. And it's how we kind of look after that. So we could move to the next slide. So we are thinking about the emotional life of the worker. And that's part of what kind of is underneath supervision and reflective practice. Okay, I'm going to share with you now 2 slides from practitioners, frontline practitioners, that talk about reflection, because often we can think in theory, reflective practice and supervision, oh yeah, it's all great, yeah, sure, it's brilliant, we should all be doing it. But what practitioners have to say is important as well. And what they say is that, yeah, look, it's okay, it's good, sometimes it's really good, but often I feel a bit defensive, and often I feel I don't want to talk about some things, and often I'm worried about what you might think of me if I say these things. So it is a complex space to get into too. So we could move to the next slide, please. So here are some frontline workers that work with families that I interviewed as part of a research study. So one worker says that, well, how we feel plays a part in how we work. Another worker said that this young person has brought me to a place where I'm wondering what it's all about. And another worker said that sometimes I think that maybe if I started to cry about the work, I just wouldn't be able to stop, or there is nobody really who'll be able to hold me or contain it. So really complex ideas. Then another worker, Chloe, it's not her real name, she said that there are certain times when I feel guilty and incompetence, but a lot of the time I feel like I brush it off or keep it away, and I'm able to lock it away. Maybe it's all a bad thing. And then Katie says, I think I would be the same as most people. We all get abuse over the phone. I laugh it off. I don't spend the day crying, just so people know. So in a way, you can read through the lines here. You can see how we are with each other, can't you? You know, that we're worried sometimes. Sometimes the work is really sad. Sometimes the work is really difficult, really complex. And sometimes we feel that if I begin to even think about this, I might fall apart. So there can be a resistance. And we have what we call defenses in the work. And sometimes our defenses of pulling back, of not wanting to go there, are really necessary, and they help us to keep going in the job. So, for example, if you're out visiting families, and I'm working with you around reflective practice, I'm not going to be saying to you, come on into the space, Michelle, and we'll chat there before you go out to the next family, and we'll take away all these defenses. That you can't do the job. It's a bit like an ambulance driver. If one of our loved ones was at the side of the road, we don't want the paramedic coming out of the back of the ambulance starting to cry. We need them to be zipped up, emotion suppressed, so they can get on with looking after our loved one. But we do need them to unzip at some point, so that all of what they're taking in doesn't get stuck, if you like, and they become unwell. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Thank you. I asked some workers in a final interview after I offered them some reflective practice groups, had their thinking changed since taking part in a reflective practice group? And this practitioner said that she's been spending more time thinking about things, thinking about the feeling part of me, thinking about how sometimes I can suppress them, sometimes I can ignore that bit of myself. If I don't think about it and don't feel it, I have to think about, well, how is that for the people I'm working with? How will they experience me? It could be very easy to become detached from what's going on and just go through the motions. And there have been times when I have done, and maybe that's where I would be, I think, if I hadn't been in this group for the last while, because things have been really difficult for the last while. Can we move to the next slide, please? So being effective in our work is not only about applying theory to understand ourselves and each other. It's about cultivating the capacity to attune to our own emotional experience and to the flow of emotional exchange that happens with those that we support and our colleagues. Transactions that are always happening, whether we notice them or not. And that's why the use of self is so important, really. And I think that supervision and reflective practice, if it's done well enough, can help us to recognize and track and make sense of the emotional dynamics that are always alive in the work. Emotion is always in the work, and can help us to deepen our practice. We could move to the next slide, please. And our role then is to understand ourselves well enough to recognize how other people's feelings affect us and how we affect other people. And by doing this, we can better understand how their worries and conflicts and distress are being communicated. We need to know ourselves so we can see how emotions pass between us, if you like. We can move to the next slide. Watching my time as well. I think I'm okay for time, am I? Yeah, okay. So, creative ways to support calm and reflection. So I'm going to shift gears slightly now. I'm going to think a little bit about, well, how do we do it in the moment? How do we support ourselves and regulate ourselves in the moment? So I'm going to ask you, what are the kind of things that you do, let's say, before you go into a family home, right afterwards, if it's been a difficult visit, it's been a, whatever, it's been challenging. What are the kind of things that you say to yourself? Or do you do anything to help kind of regulate or help you to settle in again? If, let's say, if you're doing another visit afterwards. Take a breath, yeah. I love the breathing. I love that you're into the breathing. That's great. Walking, yeah. Yeah, breathe. Walking, lovely. Yeah, talking to others. I'm just writing some of these down. Yeah, driving in silence, thinking and processing, yeah. Music. Yeah, staying within role boundaries, yeah. Listening to music. Yeah, patting yourself down, wiping it away. That's such a lovely technique. Breathing, yeah. Lovely. Music. Having water in the car. And classical music. Classical music is great because it accesses parts of the brain that other music doesn't access. Turns on parts of the brain that don't get turned on. Debriefing and breathing. Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. So these are really, this is amazing. I feel like I could say bye now. That's it. I'm going to be saying what you already are doing. So there are a few things, aren't there? So breathing is a wonderful technique to use, before or after something difficult has happened in work. And there are different breathing techniques, and you'll know this, so you can find them. You can find them now. Breathing has now become very popular. We have breathwork facilitators. I remember speaking to a group of nurses, and one nurse said to me, Nicola, I've been breathing my whole life. Of course, I know how to breathe. But there are certain types of breathing, obviously, that are more helpful than others. And so when we think about breathing, we think about our nervous system, and we think about whether it's a sympathetic nervous system breath we're taking or a parasympathetic nervous system breath we're taking. And some breathing can bring us up and some breathing can bring us down. And so that's really useful to know about when you are thinking about how am I going to breathe? And noticing even, I love that some of you said, I get into the car, I just breathe, right? I wipe myself down. Noticing how you're breathing, because sometimes, a bit like when I first came on the call, I think I was breathing just from my mouth. I don't think I was taking any breaths. So sometimes when we're a bit anxious or a bit nervous, we can breathe from up here. And that's good some of the time, but it's not good all of the time. So taking a deep breath can shift that kind of dead oxygen around the bottom part of our lungs. So you know this, and it's lovely to hear it back from the chat. The other thing that you mentioned is music. Music is gorgeous, and often staff will tell me, or practitioners will tell me, when I leave, if work is really hard and I'm driving home, I can't listen to anything. So that's just a little, I wouldn't say it's a red flag, it's an orange flag, just in terms of your level of overwhelm. If you feel that you're driving home and you can't listen to anything, then you've probably just reached your limit on that day. And that's a little orange flag to be sure of. I think the what's also really helpful is, I think somebody said as well, that they drink water. Really cold water is also very good. So, and then I just wrote down what was it? Yeah, and walking. So any kind of exercise as well, because I think what we forget is what we used to think is we process the work we do in our brain. I think now, and based on some of your responses, you know this, we also process it at a bodily level. So we're also taking in what's happening in our environment in the body. Our body's a witness. You'll know that. And we've got lots more talk kind of happening about that, which is so helpful. So we're processing it at a bodily level as well. And so we have to treat the body as well as the mind. So you're treating your body by taking that breath, by having that cold glass of water, by walking, by listening to music. You're telling the body, we're now out of that space. It's time to, settle down. The mind might know, but the body doesn't know. So the body needs a message. And so I love the other example in the chat that I really loved was wiping down. I'm not sure what that person does in terms of wiping down, but making that connection with the body is lovely in that. And it takes less than a minute, but it's really good. Okay. Could we move to the next slide? There are many ways in which we can calm the nervous system in situations of high intensity, and these are creative and evidence-based strategies that I've just put together for you this morning that can be used discreetly before, during, or immediately after a visit. So a temperature reset. So we can have a very cold glass of water, bottle of water, run our hands under cold water, or place a cold cloth on our back of the neck would be wonderful, but on our head, wherever. And again, this is just giving an indication to the body, to down regulate, if you like. So, and very effective, very, very effective. It rapidly activates the parasympathetic nervous system, so signaling safety, so the calming part of our system, if you like. And it also stimulates what we call the vagus nerve. So I'm not going to get into polyvagal theory with you today, but many of you probably know about polyvagal theory at this point. But what it does is cold exposure stimulates the vagus nerve, reduces the heart rate and the stress response. So any way you can have that cold glass of water, you can wash your hands in very cold water, or place a cold like face cloth or on the back of the neck where the brainstem is, it can be very, very helpful. That's just a very quick kind of technique. Let's say if you come back into the car. Grounding through objects is also really helpful. So you could even have if for those of you who might be tactile, you could have, let's say, a stone or a very small little squishy or some, even a keyring that you might like in your pocket. And in the moment, you can put your hand in your pocket and just rub it. And what that does is just refocuses gently. You can go back into the conversation again. That's, that needs to be done. But it's just a very kind of gentle grounding in the middle of an interaction. That you can also use visual anchors. So you can find something on the wall or a plant or picture or something on the wall. Just again, you're refocusing. You're just refocusing. You're taking a little bit of perspective. Even if I was to say to you now, you're probably looking at the screen. Hopefully you're looking at the screen anyway. You're probably looking at the screen. But if I was to say to you, find something in the room that you like, just sit back for a second and just look at that thing in the room, whatever it is. Just look now. See. So for me, there's just a plant over there. It just shifts, doesn't it? It just shifts the energy slightly. And we know that even looking at plants, even looking at pictures of nature has a positive impact on us. So even if we can't get out in nature all the time or as much as we want, we know that even having a plant in our room, even having a picture of a plant, we know that can really help. And that shift from intense focus to moving back and like more perspective taking and focusing. Humming or silent vibration really helps. I'm not suggesting you hum in the middle of a family visit, but maybe afterwards. But humming is very good for the vagus nerve, very good for like down regulating. And then movement in micro bursts. So you might run up and down the stairs, you might just do a quick kind of a movement, or you might tense the muscles, release them again. But this kind of movement in microbursts just again is just another way to connect to the body. Scent anchors can be very good. So I don't know if you use diffusers, or you might want to use some essential oil or something like that. Just again, have something in the car that you can just smell. Soothes, and to make sure that it's something that you like. So for example, lavender, not everyone likes lavender. For those of you who like lavender, it's down regulating. Citrus or lemon is very upregulating, or peppermint. Mint is great. If you were up for putting mint in your water, mint is really good. So fresh mint leaves, and sometimes you can get those bottles with, the inserts in the middle. You put the mint in there, so you're not drinking leaves, and the mint is just infusing into the water, and then you can leave it overnight in the fridge. And because you all have so much time, I'm only joking. You can, but if you can, every now and then, it's great. Mint is really good. Mint is very good for keeping alert and staying focused. So scent anchors are very good. And then a tiny gratitude reset. So sometimes when we're feeling overwhelmed, or when we're really busy, we don't have time to sit down and think, I'm grateful for all these things, and make a list. But what you could say to yourself is, when you're driving, or when you're going between visits, or when you're feeling overwhelmed, look, is there anything that I feel grateful for just now? And that could be something really small. And what that does just helps us. Again, all of these things really are about just calming our nervous system, helping us to refocus, and supporting our reflection, if you like. They're not going to change the world, but they might change your sense of the world in the moment. I just see a message in the chat from Lisa, who says that she brings mint humbugs to the office. Yes, absolutely, Lisa. Mint, anything like that. We could have a whole other morning on the kinds of foods that regulate, but mints are super. And you can get all different types of mints, but mint is really good for alert, focusing. Yeah, you're going to have to share the mint humbugs now. Okay, so if we could move to the next slide, that would be great. So we're going to talk a little bit now about just the different types of reflective practice techniques. So when we are thinking, what kind of models might we use for ourselves, that we could just be thinking about. So if we want to move to the next slide. So you'll know this one very well. This is Kolb's experiential learning cycle, and it really thinks about concrete experience, what's happening in front of me, reflective observation, what am I noticing about myself and the other person, abstract conceptualization, what patterns or learning does this connect to, and active experimentation, what can I try differently right now? So that can be really helpful. There's also another one by Gibbs reflective cycle, that you'll know as well. And that one looks at what happened, what was I thinking and feeling, what was good about the experience. These are really good. I have these in my diary. Like, I have these diagrams just kind of cut out and stuck in. They can be very helpful. I mean, you will all have blind spots. You'll all have things that challenge you a little bit more than others. For me, sometimes it's working with dads, because I had a difficult relationship with my own dad. So I know if I'm in a space working with a mom and dad, I can go to extremes. I could become really too enmeshed with the dad, and then I could also become very cross with the dad. And so I know that. So if I'm it doesn't mean I can't do a very good job. It just means that's my vulnerability. So I know that if I'm going into that space, I need to be doing a bit more reflecting. Does that make sense? So we do have these kind of biases or blind spots, if you like, and some of these models can be really helpful. We do then have another model that's a little, if we just move to the next slide, if that's okay. So this is by Gillian Ruch, and this is the 4 C's of reflective practice. So she talks about containment. So am I holding my own emotions and those of others? Clarity, what is actually being communicated? I love that question. What's actually being communicated here? Collaboration, how do I engage the family in shared meaning? And change, what small shift might help at this moment? The 4 C's integrate emotional containment, cognitive sense making, relational working, and practical action. And it helps us to hold the balance between thinking and feeling, which I think is very important, and between reflection and action. Often we can be very busy thinking and acting, and not feeling and reflecting. And I think sometimes the systems around us And in society in general, we've shifted much more towards thinking and action. Everything needs to be thought about and acted on, and as quickly as possible. And we don't privilege so much the feeling and the reflection, which is very important. Thanks, Dolores. Gibbs. It supports resilience by validating the emotional experience of the worker while keeping focus on the needs of the family as well. So I love that idea. And I'm sure that you've thought about this idea of containment, which is so important in your work, particularly because you're working with the under fives. So containment is a massive part of the developmental experience of babies and parents, isn't it? From, you know this, we don't, you know, but from the baby's perspective, the baby can't communicate with words, so communicates via projection of emotions and feelings. And so the job of the parent is to provide some element of containment. So what we mean by containment is the taking in. Oh, sorry, there's some background noise there. So what we mean by the process of containment is we mean that we take in something and we're digesting it, so we're metabolizing it, we're chewing on it, and we're giving it back in more meaningful form. And in essence, that's what the parent is doing with the baby all the time, in a good enough space. Sometimes we get that right, sometimes we don't. And you see it when a baby's crying and we're thinking, what's wrong? What do we need to do here? You're trying to work it out, aren't you? And that's kind of containment. You're chewing on it and you're giving it back. What we want to be doing that in the work. We don't want things to be getting inside of us and lodging there. We want to be chewing them on them and giving them back because they don't belong to us. That makes sense. So this model is good by Gillian. So now I want to move on to a couple of more slides. How am I for time? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I want to move on to a couple of more slides now that are going to look at reflective questions to ask yourself in the moment. I always think this is really helpful because sometimes when we're in the middle of something, like we don't know what to be asking ourselves, we're just caught up in something. So, feel free to take a photo of these or you'll have the slides afterwards. I would, again, these are things I stick on my wall. Just to remind myself, because I lose the language, I lose the language when I'm with a family or when I'm too kind of emotional in the space. So noticing what is being communicated here, both verbally and non-verbally, acknowledging on ourselves, how am I feeling right now? And how might that be shaping my response? Whose needs are being prioritized in the moment? Mine, the family's, the child's, the infant's. Pausing, am I reacting or am I responding? And connecting, which I think is a really good question. What does this situation remind me of? So there may be a dynamic in a family that reminds you of something personal. That's okay. That doesn't mean you can't do a really good job. I think just bringing it to the surface helps immediately. And then acting with care. What small shift could I make that would support safety, trust, or connection with that person? So we move to the next slide, if that's okay. So just more reflective in the moment questions. So am I truly listening or am I preparing my response? I think this is a really good question. I have to ask myself that quite a bit. Have I checked that the family feels understood? So we might do that by saying, look, what have you just heard me say there? Is what I'm saying making sense? Or often, I know for myself, I could keep talking to family when I'm visiting them and I haven't, and they're nodding and they're saying, yeah. And I think I'm brilliant, but actually they've not taken up much. So I find one of the real challenges for me is to say out loud, I'm actually just going to stop there because I've said a lot. Is like, what have you taken in, or, what's going on for you now? It's about kind of stopping ourselves in that moment, isn't it? How can I show empathy without losing boundaries? Really important one, I think, too. Because we need empathy. We need, we need empathy. We need compassion in the work. It's very important. Am I using language that empowers rather than blames? So sometimes when so that's very important, okay? But what I would say is, look, I think we need to apply some of the same rules to ourselves as practitioners as we do to parents. It's good enough, practitioners. Sometimes something will come out of your mouth that you feel, oh my God, I can't believe I said that. And you have to reel back, or you have to apologize. You have to say, I'm sorry if it came out that way. So it's good enough using language that empowers rather than blames, trying your best, trying to be as mindful as possible. And if you get it wrong, saying sorry as quickly as possible is very important. Do I need to step back and give space for silence? That's another one that I have highlighted. Just stopping for a minute and just leaving a space. Leaving the family come in. What small step could help build trust in this moment? And what's the most important takeaway from this interaction for me? What should I note to bring to supervision later? So what needs to go? Often when we get to supervision, if there's a gap between what we want to bring and getting to supervision, we can find ourselves saying, I don't really have anything to say. And it can take a while to warm up. So even just noting if something has come up and just bringing that along with you can be really helpful. And then another one that's helpful is if I imagine this family looking back, what do I hope they'll say about how I treated them today? That's an important one, I think, too. Okay. So what I'm going to get you to do now, if it's okay, just for the final piece before we think about questions or comments or thoughts, thanks, Dolores, is I'd like you to get a pen and paper, if that's okay. So even if you just need to take a few seconds, just get a pen and paper, if you can, if you're able to. Oh, some background noise there.
I just unshared the PowerPoint while you're talking, and then I'll reshare it again, okay?
Thank you. Thanks so much. Okay. So what I'd like you to do now is well, first of all, if you're in a space, I'd like you to, if you feel safe enough, just to get comfortable in the chair that you're in. So just to sit back for a minute, just get comfortable if you can in the chair that you're in. And what I'd like you to do is feel free to, just in this moment, just turn your camera off, but do pay attention. So do make sure you can hear me. So what I'd like you to do is to close your eyes if you feel safe enough to do that in the space that you're in. If you don't feel safe enough to do that in the space that you're in, I'd ask you just to find a spot on the ground to look at. And what I'd like you to do is to just take a moment. So just take a moment, have a sense of where you're at, how you're doing with all the information that has been shared so far. Just checking in on your breathing. How are you breathing? You might want to take a deep breath in this moment. If that feels okay, then absolutely do that. You may want to just check it. Are there any parts in your body that feel a bit more tense than others? So we're not doing a grounding right now. We're just doing a short check-in. Just checking in. We're just refocusing a bit, like I said earlier. We're just shifting the focus now. Okay. And so when you're ready, I'd like you to turn your camera back on. And what I'd like you to do for the next couple of minutes, and I'll keep the time. I'll keep the time for us. I'd like you to write down about what and who you value in your lives. So what makes you feel better? You can write these down if you like, just so you'll be able to keep track. So what and who do you value in your lives? What makes you feel better? And what restores your faith in the world? What I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to time you. You're going to have 3 minutes. And what I'd like you to do is to keep writing. So even if you feel that you have it all said, or you've nothing more to say, just keep writing, even if it's blah, 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 blah. Just keep the pen on the page, keep writing. So what and who you value in your lives, what makes you feel better, and what restores your faith in the world. So I'm going to ask you to start now, and I'll ask you to put down your pens in 3 minutes. Okay, I'll ask you to put your pen down. All right, so would anybody feel brave enough to put in the chat or to say what that was like? So what the experience was like?
I don't mind chatting. I think it was interesting having three questions that you kind of start focusing on the first one. But then you were like, but then you can see similarities between them all.
Yeah.
The same thing about people was the big thing for me that seemed to come up.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, lovely. Thanks, Marion. Yeah, thanks, Karen. Do you think you could have kept writing or it was too long? Yeah. You see stuff and think, yeah, calm experience. I drifted off into a rant. Lovely. Thanks, Sinead. 3 minutes seemed long. Yeah, lovely. Yeah. So it's not too long, is it, for those of us who enjoy doing that? Some could have kept writing. Some of you won't like it, and that's okay. The kind of intention with an exercise like this, the 3 minutes flew, could have kept writing. The intention is that you have a boundary, because sometimes when you sit down to write, you can think, I have nothing to say. You know, I don't have time for this. But actually, if you set a time, just even 3 minutes, that processes something, doesn't it? Because we have a lot actually stored. 3 minute boundary kept me focused. Yeah, lovely. Okay. So will we do one more and then we'll stop? I'll show you the last slide, and if there are any questions or comments, we'll have time for that. Okay, so this time, in 3 minutes again, and what I'd like you to write about is who inspires you in your working life and what matters to you at work. So who inspires you in your working life and what matters to you at work? I'll keep an eye on the time. So keep the pen on the page, you know, keep writing, even if it's, you know, gibberish. Okay, I'll ask you to put your pen down. And again, any brave, courageous people who would like to say something in the chat or unmute and say something about what that was like, what happened. that one easier to answer. Okay, a bit more challenging for others. Okay. Yeah, yeah. See the benefit. Yeah, lovely. Okay. A bit more challenging, yeah. Mm. Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much for taking the time. These are really lovely. It's lovely. Okay. So thank you for just going with it and for just going with the exercise. That's really, really helpful. Okay. Yeah, lovely. These are some lovely comments here. Right. So, free writing, reflective writing that's timed can be very helpful to some and is a very useful exercise to process in a really small way what's kind of happening inside. Because often we can think somebody said they thought they'd written loads and then more came, you know, so we're holding a lot, aren't we, you know, of information on the inside. Okay, thank you. The other thing that and it's coming up in some of the comments as well, is that sometimes when we do stop to think and begin to write, it can be emotional. It can be an emotional experience. It's all right. It's okay. You know, we are full of emotion, aren't we? And so that's, in a way, we have it timed, and you're in charge. And the request from me is not to share what you've written. You'll notice I didn't request you to share what you've written. So the request is, what was the task like? What was the exercise like? So there's no pressure to share. That's yours. That's yours, isn't it? And you decide. Okay. So I'm going to just show you the final slide, if that's okay. So if that's okay, Michelle, we just might show the final slide and then we can come back into a group again. Okay, so just the next one, if that's okay. Okay. So just to I want to finish on this because it is from Winnie the Pooh. And this is a quote from one of the books. It says, when you are a bear of very little brain and you think of things, you find sometimes that a thing which seemed very thingish inside of you is quite different when it gets out into the open and has other people looking at it. So I'd like to suggest that this is one of the opportunities provided by a safely held reflective space in your workspace or outside or in doing reflective practice. But it's easier said than done, because there are lots of things, both to do with us, families we work with, the organization and society, that can get in the way of this. But the fact is that we cannot do this work alone. Although with experience and the right training, we become better able to manage complex and difficult encounters without seeking help all of the time. But a worker, I think, that can use their psychological experiences effectively won't be ashamed or afraid of asking for help, of not knowing what's going on, or of feeling incompetent and confused. But struggling on without having a mind of another or without looking at that support, we do become psychologically burdened and de-skilled ourselves. So there is a lot of potential in creating spaces to think for yourself and reflect, and also in using the ones that you have. Okay, so I'll stop there and we have a bit of time to talk.
I'll come back in there. Thanks so much, Nicola. Nicola is able to answer any, if you have any questions. You can either come off mute and talk, or you can put it into the chat and then we'll say it for her if you want. So if anyone has any questions, put your hand up. We'll give you, we'll get to you.
Or comments or reflections.
Or comments, yeah, about how you found it. I can just say it was absolutely brilliant. It was a lot of emotions were coming up for me, I have to say, and a lot of stuff actually. Like I was thinking, right, oh, okay, supervision, reflective practice, great, but actually, it's all intertwines back into self-care again. doesn't it? Looking after yourself, making sure that you're your best self for going into the homes, and then when you come out of them, ensuring that you get back to your best self. So thanks, Nicola. I really got a lot out of it there.
Good. Pleasure, Michelle. Yeah, I mean,
Nicola,
look, yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
just say that that was super beneficial, but also Michelle can verify this. I'm actually going to be doing this topic for college. So I got loads of information out today. I was like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah,
Great.
all them references, yeah. And
Great.
just on that note, do you actually have a journal published that I'd be able to look at?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah, I can share some papers that I've published. Yeah, absolutely.
Yay.
And feel free to get in touch by email. I can share lots of resources. That's no problem at all. I'm only delighted.
And
Thank
by
you
the way,
so
Nicola
much.
has said that she will come back and do the part 2 of this. So that'll happen before Christmas. So just to let you know.
If you'd like, yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Oh,
my
they
last-
would.
Didn't even ask them to give you feedback. No, that's
Hi,
quite
Claire.
confident.
Yeah, just to echo that, I think I loved the self-care and being able to look more deeply at that, because definitely the work is becoming so much more complex as society is becoming so much more complex. And I would love to see some of your articles as well, actually. But also just looking at bringing all of those evidence pieces back into grounding into our reflective practice, and I suppose demonstrating and showing our home visitors this is the rationale, this is the why, and using that to support them, to support themselves, but also to feel safe enough to be able to say, I'm not okay, and be us being able to respond to them. So that was massively insightful, and I will definitely be back for part 2. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
And lads, can I just say, some of those screenshots that you had, Nicola, the PowerPoints, some of them could definitely be used. I do have some money for materials on this project, so I will look at seeing, can I get them some of them turned into stickers that I'm sure every home visitor normally has a diary that we could send out to you, and that, you know, we can send them out in packs, and that we can see about giving you all them, and you can stick them in your diary, so that at least when you open up your diary, you can think about it. I just thought they were really good. So, Marion, do you want to come in there, and then we'll get Jen?
Yeah, thanks for that, Nicola. I've already looked at your website. So I'm studying as well, so it is helpful.
Okay.
My one question, I suppose probably 2 questions really. It's I suppose it's hard for, I don't know, is it a nation? Is it us? It's because we're women, because we're Irish, I don't know what, but we struggle with taking the time to reflect. And there was a nice line you said around, you know, something to do with, I wrote it down, it was you're doing, you know, the doing over the thinking. And I think, I suppose, running a reflective practice session should be done by professionals who are trained in things, or do you feel that, like, as a coordinator, that you could upskill and do it with your team, or should it be an independent person that's doing this?
Okay, so that's a really that's a really complex question, you know. I think I don't think it would be helpful for me to say, oh, I just think it needs to be somebody who's trained, who's an expert, because I think that shuts down the opportunity. So what I would say is that if you are thinking about running a reflective practice group, there are certain rules that you should follow. And certain, one of them is the membership of the group is really important, and the task of the group. So what is the task of the group, and also what model might you use? So for anybody who is really interested in thinking about a group, I'm very happy to share some of those ideas. And I think that the group facilitator should be supervised on group facilitation. Do you see what I'm saying? So I don't want to shut it down, because otherwise it becomes this kind of expert field and it shuts down opportunity. But I do think if you want the group to go really well, then of course I would definitely have some things to say about, you know, if you came to me and said, Nicola, I'm interested in setting up a group, I'd be saying, think about this, this, and this. You know, the membership should be this, and what's the task of the group? Do you see what I'm saying? So
yeah, I think it's similar to like the mental health networks as well. They're the same kind of I suppose practicalities has to happen with that.
Yeah, I think the slight difference with an infant mental health network, and there's some coordinators here on the network I know, like the size of the network doesn't matter, is my understanding. There could be 12 people maybe in the network, could there? Yeah. Whereas with the reflective practice group, the group number, the amount of people in the group is very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're talking about 6, you're talking about 5, lower.
5, 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It may be 7, but yeah. It's
Yeah.
a smaller group, it's more focused, and the task
Right.
would be different, of course,
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, Nicola.
Thanks,
of course.
Marianne. Jen, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, thanks so much, Nicola, for your talk. Now, my kind of comment was similar to kind of Marianne's as well. So, because we work in the same place, we have similar experiences.
Okay.
But a lot of our home visitors would maybe struggle to be reflective, and I know it comes down to coordinators kind of facilitating that space as well. But I think we're great at giving our feedback about how our visit went and what actually happened, but not so great, or maybe don't have as much time to kind of delve deeper into it and kind of explore why things might happen or what might have been going on in the background for the parent or the child, you know. So just the kind of question around how would you support someone who's really struggling to be reflective? But I actually think the slide that you put up with those kind of prompt questions, that one's really, really helpful, and we'll definitely use those questions. So just say thank you so much.
Pleasure. I think as well, you know, sometimes people aren't in a space for reflecting, and you'll know that from your experience. Sometimes people are just not in a space, and it can feel quite scary. So I often think about, you know, like if I'm in a group myself, I'm often thinking about the responsibility of the reflective practice coordinator or facilitator, that like I have to be really careful here. I might want them to reflect, but I don't need to drag them, you know, into reflection. And I say that for myself. Sometimes that's a real challenge for me, because just because I think it's brilliant, and if they could just get there where I think they need to go, it could be really helpful. But that could be too quick, and you could do some real emotional damage, you know, if you like. So yeah, it's pace, isn't it? And my own supervisor would say that to me, you know, gently, Nicola, don't forget pacing, you know, don't forget the rhythm, you know. So yeah.